The moment a narcissistic person realizes they can cross your boundaries without facing any consequences, the dynamic begins to change. It does not mean you are powerless or weak. It means you may have been trying to communicate with someone who was never following the same rules of respect and accountability. The truth is, there are certain calm and powerful statements that can completely shift the way a narcissist responds to you. These words are not about attacking them or proving a point. They are about protecting your peace and showing that manipulation, disrespect, and control will no longer have the same effect. By understanding what to say and how to say it, you can stop repeating the same exhausting patterns and start creating healthier boundaries. Many people have experienced moments where they leave a conversation and think, "Why didn't I say something?" They replay the situation in their mind, wishing they had responded differently or defended themselves better. If you have ever felt that way, you are not alone. The goal is not to defeat someone in an argument or force them to admit they are wrong. The real goal is to break the cycle where someone repeatedly pushes your limits while you remain silent. A narcissistic person's biggest advantage is often not their confidence, intelligence, or charm. It is your hesitation, your need to explain yourself, and your hope that if you find the perfect words, they will finally understand your emotions. The difficult truth is that many narcissistic individuals already recognize when their behavior hurts you. The issue is not always a lack of understanding. The problem is that control, attention, or maintaining power may matter more to them than acknowledging your feelings. This is why long explanations and emotional conversations often do not create the change you hope for. Instead of helping them understand, your explanations can sometimes give them more information to argue against, twist, or use to continue the same pattern. This is why boundaries are often more effective than trying to convince someone to treat you better. The first powerful phrase you can use is simple: "That doesn't work for me." Understanding that narcissistic people often test boundaries before respecting them is one of the most important things to recognize when dealing with someone who is self-centered or manipulative. Many people believe respect should naturally exist in every relationship, whether it is with a partner, family member, friend, or coworker. But some personalities operate by observing what they can get away with. They may test your reactions and look for signs that you will tolerate certain behaviors. These tests can appear in small ways, such as constantly interrupting you, ignoring your opinions, making hurtful jokes, crossing personal boundaries, or expecting special treatment without considering your needs. At first, these actions may seem insignificant, and you may convince yourself that it is not worth addressing. However, repeated small behaviors can reveal a larger pattern. A narcissistic person may be paying attention to whether you challenge the behavior or quietly accept it. The reason boundaries are so important is because they show that your words have meaning. A boundary is not simply saying what you dislike. It is showing what you will do when that behavior continues. If you repeatedly say that something hurts you but continue allowing it without any change, the other person may assume that your limit is not firm. They learn that your words can be ignored because there is no real consequence attached. When you communicate a boundary and consistently follow through, you send a different message. You show that your self-respect is not based on their approval or reaction. This does not require shouting, anger, threats, or dramatic confrontations. In many cases, staying calm is far more powerful because it removes the emotional reaction that a manipulative person may be looking for. The strongest response is often a clear statement followed by consistent action. For example, if someone repeatedly speaks to you in a disrespectful way, calmly ending the conversation each time teaches them that access to you depends on how they treat you. The lesson is not created through endless arguments or repeated explanations. It is created through consistency. Boundaries become powerful when they are supported by action, not when they are only spoken about. A narcissistic person may not immediately care about how their behavior affects your emotions, but they often recognize when your responses change and when their usual tactics no longer produce the same results. Your strength comes from being clear, steady, and unwilling to negotiate your basic respect. Remember, explanations can create opportunities for manipulation, but firm boundaries create clarity. Clarity is one of the most powerful tools when dealing with narcissistic personalities because it removes unnecessary conflict and prevents endless discussions. Many people assume that if they explain their thoughts, feelings, and decisions in enough detail, the other person will eventually understand and respect their point of view. In healthy relationships, this approach often works because both people are willing to listen, reflect, and find common ground. However, a narcissistic person may approach explanations in a completely different way. Instead of trying to understand your perspective, they may search for weaknesses in your words, look for something to challenge, or find ways to redirect the conversation away from your original point. The more details you provide, the more opportunities a narcissistic person may have to create arguments around them. For example, if you say no to a request and then spend several minutes explaining your reasons, they may ignore the fact that you already made a decision. Instead, they may focus on questioning your explanation. They might challenge your reasons, bring up unrelated situations, accuse you of changing your mind, or make you feel guilty for choosing what is best for yourself. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about your boundary. It becomes a debate where you feel pressured to prove that your decision is valid. This is how control can slowly shift away from you. Clarity changes the entire dynamic because it does not leave as much space for negotiation. A simple statement like, "I'm not able to do that," "I have made my decision," or "that doesn't work for me," communicates your position without creating an opening for endless discussion. These statements are not meant to be cold or disrespectful. They simply show that your choices do not require approval from someone else. When you focus on the decision instead of constantly defending the reason behind it, you protect yourself from being pulled into unnecessary arguments. Your boundary becomes a statement of self-respect rather than a topic for someone else to analyze. Some people worry that being brief will make them appear harsh or uncaring, but there is a difference between being clear and being hostile. Clarity is confidence expressed in a calm and simple way. You are not responsible for making someone agree with every boundary you set. Your responsibility is to communicate your limits honestly and respect yourself enough to maintain them. When you stop over-explaining, you remove the extra space where manipulation often happens. Conversations become shorter, emotional pressure decreases, and your decisions remain yours instead of becoming something someone else tries to control or challenge. Confidence is often more effective than confrontation when dealing with narcissistic behavior. Many narcissistic individuals are familiar with conflict. They may know how to respond when someone becomes angry, emotional, or defensive. In fact, intense reactions can sometimes give them exactly what they want: attention, emotional energy, and an opportunity to shift the focus away from their actions. When a conversation turns into a heated argument, the original issue can disappear. Suddenly, the discussion is no longer about their disrespectful behavior, but about your reaction to it. They may deny responsibility, present themselves as the victim, or turn the entire situation into a competition about who is right. This is why calm confidence can be much more powerful than trying to win through confrontation. A grounded response does not give unnecessary energy to the conflict. It keeps the focus on your boundary and your choices rather than allowing the conversation to become a battle. When you remain clear, composed, and consistent, you show that your emotions are not something someone else can control. Your strength is not found in proving your point louder. It is found in knowing your worth and refusing to be pulled into a cycle where your peace depends on someone else's reaction. Confidence works in a completely different way from confrontation. It does not come from speaking louder, becoming more aggressive, or trying to overpower someone emotionally. Real confidence comes from being secure in your own choices and trusting yourself enough to stand by your boundaries. A confident person does not feel the constant need to prove they are right or convince everyone to accept their perspective. They can say no without feeling guilty, express disagreement without becoming defensive, and leave conversations that are going nowhere without needing to deliver the final statement. This kind of calm certainty creates a situation where manipulation becomes much more difficult because there is less emotional reaction for someone else to control. One of the reasons confidence is so powerful is because it removes the emotional energy that many narcissistic interactions depend on. Some narcissistic individuals seek reactions because those reactions make them feel influential or in control. Anger, frustration, guilt, and emotional explanations can keep the connection active and give them more opportunities to redirect the conversation. But when they encounter someone who remains calm, steady, and clear about their position, many of their usual strategies become less effective. Attempts to create guilt, shame, or insecurity lose their power because a confident person is not relying on the narcissist's approval to feel secure. True confidence also reflects a deep sense of self-respect. It communicates that your standards, values, and decisions are not determined by another person's opinion. You do not need to insult someone, win every debate, or prove your importance through conflict. Your behavior already demonstrates your worth. Sometimes the strongest message is not a powerful argument, but the quiet certainty of someone who knows what they will and will not accept. That calm strength often creates a much greater impact than an emotional confrontation because it shows that your peace is no longer controlled by another person's reactions. A major mindset shift when dealing with narcissistic behavior is understanding that you do not need someone else's approval to maintain a boundary. This can be difficult for many people because we are often taught that healthy communication requires discussion, compromise, and finding mutual agreement. In relationships where both people value respect and understanding, this approach can create connection. However, when dealing with someone who repeatedly ignores, challenges, or manipulates your limits, constantly seeking their agreement can keep you trapped in the same cycle. A boundary is not something another person has to approve before it becomes valid. Many people hesitate to enforce boundaries because they are waiting for the other person to understand their reasons, acknowledge their feelings, or admit that the boundary is fair. A narcissistic person may use this hesitation to their advantage by creating endless debates around your choices. The truth is that a boundary is not a request for permission. It is a clear statement about what you choose to allow and what you choose to remove from your life. Its power does not come from another person agreeing with it. Its power comes from your willingness to follow through with it. A narcissistic person may criticize your boundary, call it unreasonable, accuse you of being selfish, or pressure you to explain yourself repeatedly. They may try to convince you that you are being too sensitive or making a bigger issue than necessary. These reactions can make you question yourself and believe that your boundary is only valid if they eventually accept it. But their approval is not what gives your boundary meaning. Your decision is based on your own values and well-being, not on whether someone else agrees with it. For example, if you decide that you will end a conversation whenever someone begins shouting at you, that boundary does not require the other person's permission. They may argue that you are avoiding the problem, demand that you stay, or become upset because they can no longer control the conversation in the same way. However, the boundary remains strong because it is based on your own action. You are not trying to control their behavior. You are deciding how you will respond to it. That difference is what makes a boundary powerful. You cannot control whether someone respects your limit, but you can control whether you continue accepting what violates it. Your role is not to make someone else agree that your boundary is reasonable. Your role is to honor that boundary through consistent action. Many people mistake boundaries for negotiations, but they are not the same thing. A negotiation requires both people to participate and find a middle ground. A boundary does not depend on another person's cooperation. It only requires you to decide what you will accept and what you will do when that limit is crossed. The moment you stop seeking permission to protect your peace, your time, and your emotional health, you begin taking back control over your own choices. Your power does not come from convincing someone to treat you better. It comes from knowing what you will do when they choose not to. The less emotional energy you give to a narcissistic person, the less influence they have over you. This is an important principle because many narcissistic individuals gain a sense of control through emotional reactions. They may feel powerful when they can affect your mood, create frustration, trigger anger, or make you question yourself. Strong emotional responses can become a sign that they still have access to your inner world. This is why small disagreements can sometimes turn into exhausting arguments that seem much bigger than the original issue. The purpose of the interaction may not always be finding a solution. Sometimes the focus becomes creating a reaction and maintaining control over the emotional atmosphere. When a narcissistic person pushes your buttons and receives a strong emotional response, they learn valuable information. They discover which subjects hurt you, which fears they can activate, and which behaviors create the strongest reaction. Over time, they may continue using those same methods because they know they are effective. Your emotional response can unintentionally reveal the areas where they have influence. However, this does not mean you should ignore your feelings or pretend that harmful behavior does not affect you. Your emotions are real and important. The difference lies in choosing when and how you express them. Responding with awareness gives you control, while reacting impulsively can give someone else control over your actions. A calm response, a short statement, and a clear boundary leave very little space for manipulation. For example, if someone insults you to provoke a reaction, responding with anger may create a longer conflict where the original disrespect gets forgotten. Instead, calmly saying, "I'm not continuing this conversation," and then removing yourself from the situation takes away the emotional reward they may be seeking. Without drama, arguing, or intense reactions, the interaction loses its power. Emotional control is often misunderstood as weakness, but it is actually a sign of strength. It shows that your choices are guided by your values rather than by someone else's attempt to trigger or control you. Short and direct statements are often more effective than long explanations because narcissistic individuals may turn conversations into opportunities to regain control. Many people believe that if they explain themselves more clearly, the other person will finally understand and respect their decision. In healthy relationships, open communication can create understanding. But with someone who constantly twists information, challenges your perspective, or refuses to respect your limits, long explanations can create more problems. Every additional detail gives them something new to question, criticize, or use as a reason to continue the discussion. Instead of hearing your boundary, they may focus on attacking the explanation behind it. When you provide a detailed defense of your choices, the conversation can slowly shift away from what you decided and toward whether your reasons are acceptable to them. They may analyze every word, point out small contradictions, or pressure you to explain yourself even further. Eventually, you may find yourself defending your emotions, your priorities, and even your right to make simple decisions. The exhausting part is that the discussion often has no clear ending because every answer creates another question. Short statements help prevent this cycle. Saying, "That doesn't work for me," "I have made my decision," or "I'm not discussing this further," keeps the focus on your choice instead of opening the door for endless debate. Some people fear that being brief will make them appear disrespectful or uncaring, but being clear does not mean being cruel. You can communicate with respect while still refusing to over-explain yourself. The purpose of a firm response is not to silence another person. It is to prevent yourself from being trapped in conversations that repeatedly challenge your boundaries and drain your energy. Simple words often reflect strong confidence because they show that you trust your own judgment. When your communication becomes clearer and your boundaries become stronger, it becomes much harder for someone to pull you into arguments designed to weaken your resolve. Respect begins when access to you is no longer automatic. This is a reality many people understand only after experiencing repeated mistreatment. Some narcissistic individuals continue disrespectful behavior because they still receive the benefits of your presence. They may criticize you, ignore your needs, manipulate your emotions, or cross your boundaries while still having access to your attention, support, time, and energy. When nothing changes after harmful behavior, they may assume there is no reason to change. The relationship continues, so the pattern continues. Over time, disrespect can become normal instead of being recognized as unacceptable. Your attention, trust, emotional investment, and availability are valuable things you offer to others. They are not things people are automatically entitled to receive, regardless of how they treat you. Healthy relationships understand that connection is built through mutual care and respect. But narcissistic individuals may sometimes view these things as guaranteed access rather than something that must be valued. This is why simply asking for better treatment may not always create change. Words alone may have little impact when there are no actions connected to them. Making access conditional does not mean becoming cruel, controlling, or seeking revenge. It means understanding that your presence should exist where respect exists. When someone repeatedly chooses disrespect, you have the right to choose distance. For example, if someone repeatedly disrespects you during conversations, you have the right to change how you respond. You may choose to end the conversation the moment insults begin. If the same behavior continues, you may decide to create more distance and limit how often you interact with that person. If someone repeatedly ignores your boundaries, you may no longer offer them the same level of access to your time, attention, and emotional energy. These actions are not about punishment or revenge. They are about showing that respect is the foundation required for a healthy connection. Your presence in someone's life should come with mutual understanding, not unlimited access, regardless of how they treat you. The most important part of setting boundaries is consistency. A boundary becomes ineffective when it is enforced only sometimes and ignored at other times. When your actions change depending on your mood or the situation, others may learn that your limits can be pushed. But when your response remains calm and predictable, the message becomes much clearer. Certain behaviors will no longer receive the same level of access, attention, or engagement. A narcissistic person may not always recognize the emotional impact of their actions, but they often notice patterns. When disrespect consistently leads to distance instead of more attention, the entire dynamic begins to change. Your time, energy, and presence become something that must be valued rather than something that can be continuously taken without consideration. Your willingness to walk away can completely change the balance of power because it removes one of the strongest forms of control a narcissistic person may rely on: the belief that you will always remain available no matter how you are treated. Many manipulative individuals become comfortable crossing boundaries because they believe there are no real consequences. They assume that after criticism, arguments, guilt trips, or hurtful behavior, everything will eventually return to normal. When that expectation remains true, there is little motivation for them to change. The cycle continues because the relationship keeps providing them with the same benefits, even after they cause harm. The truth is that narcissistic individuals usually do not change because someone finally finds the perfect words or creates the perfect emotional explanation. A long conversation, a heartfelt message, or a passionate argument may not create the transformation you hope for. Change begins when their usual methods stop producing the same results. When you stop over-explaining yourself, stop asking for permission to protect your peace, stop getting pulled into unnecessary conflicts, and start supporting your words with consistent actions, the entire relationship dynamic starts to shift. Your power was never found in convincing someone else to respect you. Your power comes from deciding what you will accept and what you will no longer tolerate. Every boundary you maintain, every calm response you choose, and every moment you step away from disrespect communicates something important about your value. You do not need anger to prove your strength. You do not need revenge to show that you matter. Self-respect speaks through your choices, your consistency, and your willingness to protect your own well-being. Many people spend years trying to earn respect from someone who has never been willing to give it freely. But respect is not something you should have to beg for, negotiate for, or obtain by constantly sacrificing yourself. It begins when you recognize your own worth and start acting from that place. When someone realizes they can no longer control your emotions, ignore your limits, or assume your presence will always be available, they are forced to see the relationship differently. Not because you changed them, but because you changed your response to them. The goal was never to control a narcissistic person or force them to behave differently. The real goal was always to stop allowing them to control you. The moment your peace becomes more important than their approval, your boundaries become more important than their opinions, and your self-respect becomes something you refuse to compromise. Something powerful happens. You begin to understand that the greatest change was not about making them see your value. It was about finally seeing it clearly yourself. And when that happens, the person who changed the most was you.